We are live here. The Funvee Tailgate is on the air. Our first foray into the new 2017 college football season. I, of course, am the G-Man here for the Funvee Tailgate presented by ThunderblogSports.com. With me is the co-pilot of the Funvee, Matty D. What's up, buddy?
Oh, my God. Football. We're just over a week away. I'm fired up. You know, there's actually a Monday night NFL game on right now, which I don't care about the preseason, but it's always nice to hear the Monday night football music. And I know we're going to be discussing college tonight, but man, it gets your blood going to think about it everything. I mean, everything that comes with football, college, pro, fantasy, game day. I mean, I can't wait for the first college game day. I'm fired up. I'm already fired up.
Game day is one of those things that at least for me, like in college, everybody sleep, I was sleeping until 11:30, 11:45. I always made sure to wake up at 11:30 to see who the guest picker was. I still do this to this day, but now I'm a little more apt to wake up. But see who the guest picker was, see how they ranked according to the season, and then see who the coach's headgear is. Always need to see who the coach's headgear is.
Oh, my God. I mean, it's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, I mean.
Just the pageantry, too. The weird thing is I feel like I can't miss college football, like regular season games, more so than NFL football games. Like, I can watch Red Zone all day, but when I'm watching college football, I love watching the big matchup of the week. I love diving in, right? Because there's just so much more around it. And you know what? I hate to say it, I think the fans in college football are better than the fans in the pros.
Well, definitely. I mean, there's a few different factors for that. One, there's a bigger connection to it. I mean, I'm wearing, granted, it's a college basketball shirt, but I'm wearing a Lehigh shirt now. You and I both have dozens of Lehigh shirts in our arsenal. And I was thinking about this earlier. I think that might be why I've always liked college football a lot. I think it's just because I've never really had a true horse in the race. You and I both, you more so, like Michigan, but I've never really had the full connection. I have Robbie, my stepbrother, who played lax there, but I didn't go to an FBS school, and of course we love Lehigh, but I love looking at the FCS scores too. I don't know. I mean, there's always been something about college sports that and back.
No, I'm so fired up for this year. And, I mean, we're going to talk about, tonight we're going to have a great conversation about a great conference, but there's so much intrigue this year too. And I just can't wait to see. I mean, every week we've got big matchups like early on too, which is always great to see. I hate when week one has like some crap matchup.
Well, they've done a good job of making sure like the kickoff is good, and all these conferences, especially with the playoff, have made sure to like have these big name opponents, at least one on their schedule. Even if it is week one, you see them in week 2 or 3, bring these guys in and have these big neutral site games. And I mean, but they make sure to spread the wealth. I mean, we're going to get right into it, but there's a lot of great games right off the bat.
Oh, right. It's and I love the playoff. I mean, we've talked a lot of it in our baseball podcasts about how the last wild card team has really changed it. I think this playoff version has changed it as well, because you not only need to fight to be number 1 or 2, but you got to make sure you're 3 or 4. I mean, last year with Penn State, Oklahoma, TCU, there were some teams that everyone thought might have a shot and then ended up not. And it was amazing to watch as we went down the stretch, how making sure you played a tough opponent and having a decent – it's almost like college basketball. I mean, I don't think it's almost like, because it's a lot different, don't get me wrong, but there's some similarities now to how you have to schedule yourself at a conference to give you those marquee games, and how losses, who you lose to matters.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you kind of go down to like a rabbit hole of figuring out, like, you want to make sure that you beat a team, but you don't want to beat them so bad that you derail their season. It didn't happen with Ohio State in the way that it easily could have with Oklahoma, but, because they shellacked the Sooners last year. But it's that one thing where you kind of hope, like, all right, come on, you still got to play. Like, you clip them in the knee, but then you kind of help them hobble across the finish line, because you need that. You don't want to make sure your resume gets too screwed.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. But we can jump right into it and go into the Big 12. That's where we're going to start for a series of previews. It's an interesting year for the Big 12. They have a championship game again, and there are no divisions. It's still 10 teams, so just straight up old school, number 1 versus number 2, no matter where you are. I mean, this is something I think the Big 12 needed. I mean, this is year 4 of the college football playoff. We've seen them now in, I believe, 1 college football. Was there a team in? No, from the Big 12 last year, right?
No, they just missed out.
Yeah, so they missed 2, and having a 13th game, definitely 13th game to get your 14th and potentially 15th, definitely a good thing. Draw though of the season, so it's kind of a mixed bag of whether or not it'll be a good or bad thing for the Big 12.
Right. I mean, I agree. And last year, that one true champion, that was their slogan, and it ended up costing them dearly. We have Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma, all had chances, and they all came up for different reasons. They all came up short. And even Oklahoma State had a pretty good year last year as well, and they lost. Remember, Oklahoma State lost in that fluke Hail Mary that should have been called off early.
Yeah, it was off. Yeah, to Central Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was that was the one that ended up as you just nailed. Like, it's crazy how many games end up being super impactful. It was a list I started putting together, and it kind of works that you're wearing a Penn State shirt because we'll get into it when we get to the Big Ten, but that was a game that they had against Minnesota that ended up mattering. And you can say what you want about the first month of football. In college, it's a lot of, as my dad calls them, tune-up games, where some of them are good teams, some of them are bad teams. They have these some of them have these big matchups. But and then the NFL, debatably, no less hitting is a little worse, but still can have a huge impact. And like we said before, you can see it with Oklahoma where they can still turn it around, but how this month goes in terms of play. But just like with our baseball previews, we're going to go bottom up. So we'll try to keep it short. We're going to try to look at a couple players on each team to look out for. You never know who's going to end up in the NFL. And a couple key games, and then we're going to come back around towards the end and kind of bring everything together. So, Matt, without further ado, let's start right at the bottom. I feel like it's a consensus pick, but the Big 12.
I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there that it'll be the Rock Chalk Jayhawks. Kansas Jayhawks is the last in the conference.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy pick to do. The Jayhawks, they had that one good season and that chaotic year where I think LSU lost 3 games and not really a ton since then. They haven't been into a bowl game since 2008, the Insight Bowl. I believe that was the year after the wacky year when they went to the Orange Bowl. But yeah, do you think anybody on this team is pro talent? Do you think there's a chance they could be an upset team?
Well, I'll tell you, Kansas might, and this is going to shock you, might have the best defense in the conference. Now,
okay.
Yep. Now, once again, we're thinking of the Big 12. When you think of the Big 12, you think of spread offenses, you think of excellent quarterbacks. But they do have a couple guys. I think the one guy that stands out is it's Dorrance Armstrong Jr. He's a defensive end for them. I like him a lot. And he's definitely pro talent. I think if he has a great year, we're talking late first in next year's draft. But they might have the best defense. The problem is they have no offense. And this is a league we've seen of spread offense, fire up. Every team in this league, including some of the teams that have traditionally been known for defense, has been offense. So I think you're going to be a little surprised by how they do on defense. They were middle of the road last year defensively. But they've got nothing going on and I'll tell you, they've got really poor defensive backs. I'd love to know why, especially when we talk about teams like TCU, Oklahoma, even in Texas. But they've struggled. This conference has struggled with great defensive backs. I guess the last one I can think of that has been really good was Justin Gilbert at Oklahoma State, who has been a bust for the Browns, and currently I think he was just cut by the Steelers.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Quick stat by Armstrong. He is not the reigning sack champion, but he's of returning players the top defensive sacks leader at 10. He was one back of Jordan Willis of Kansas State. I think their quarterback is going to hold them back. They have some good receivers that I don't know necessarily are pro talent, but at least are quick enough. The thing is apples to oranges at least at the very least. A couple of guys I'd look out for turning the top of their receiving core, both Steven Sims and I'm gonna screw his name up, Laquiote Gonzalez. I messed up his last name or his first name. But yeah, I mean it's going to be an interesting season. I think it's a tough run. They did win one game last season in conference play. Over under there. I mean, do you think they can improve upon that? Do you think it's the same? Where are you thinking for?
We're talking
their overall record once we ended up
in conference, right?
Yeah, they were 2-10 overall and 1-8 in conference.
Right. I mean, I guess you got to look at who they could possibly beat.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Their home conference games, those are usually the best shot at it. West Virginia is where they kick it off the end of September or September 23rd. Texas Tech is their homecoming game. I feel like that might be their best chance.
I think so too. We'll talk about Texas Tech soon, but yeah, I think that's definitely going to be something that they need to be looking at on their schedule as a potential victory there.
Actually, I think Baylor, November 4th, home against Baylor. We'll get to Baylor. I'm not too high on them.
Yeah.
I'd throw those out as the top two opportunities. The rest, they're playing top tier talent at home, and then still a tough road schedule ahead of them in the rest of the conference. They also, I mean, they could have a 3-9 year. They're hosting Southeastern Missouri. That's a win. Central Michigan's a toss-up. Ohio's a toss-up. That's an away game, though. Who knows? I mean, the home games, there is the home field advantage, much more so in college football. So we'll see how it goes.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm one game. I think Texas Tech is their shot.
Yeah.
If they're not challenging Texas Tech, maybe there's somebody else. But I think there's enough talent in this. They've got a lot of work to do. But you know what? If someone gets hot, a wide receiver or something like that, maybe they blow up one game and they sneak it to two. But I'm picking one.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. I think one is the magic number there. But let's move up to number 9.
So
Iowa State
I think
here.
You're going to say Iowa State. I'm actually going to say Texas Tech. Now,
okay,
we'll talk about Iowa State first. So we can dive in there and just kind of walk through what we think is going on with this Iowa State. So go ahead, give me your lowdown on Iowa State.
My big thing with Iowa State, they're not really returning a lot of starters. That's one thing we didn't really cover with Kansas. They're returning 8 offensive players, which could be a big thing. Iowa State's only returning 5 and 6 on the defensive side of the ball. That's something that's not really – it's talked about a little bit, but it's not necessarily the best thing that's talked about, especially with recruiting classes and on the upper end of the echelon of college football premium talent.
Mm-hmm.
For them, I mean, they got some guys who could be good. The difficult thing for me is, like Kansas, the quarterback play is not that great. They had both Jacob Park and Joel Lanning split time last year. They have Jacob Park as the potential starter. He came from Georgia, so there's some talent there. I think their defense is not so great either. They have a few returners in the backfield for them, but I think it's going to be a rough road for them. And I mean, it kind of depends if they can pull off a few wins early on. They play Iowa at home. They're big opponents, including an FCS school, so they'll get a few wins under their belt. Well, I shouldn't say that their second opponent's Iowa, but we'll see where they go there. But the road or their Big 12 schedule, at least looking at it, isn't too pretty. They have to. The only real home game that's a surefire win, I think, is Kansas. Texas is a toss-up, but we'll get to Texas. What's your lowdown on them? Why do you have them higher?
So I'll tell you, last year they lost 4 of their games by 7 or fewer points.
Yep.
I like Matt Campbell. He spent a lot of time at Toledo as a head coach, got them number 20 in the AP poll. We're not talking about a superstar program there. We're really in year 2 of him, of Coach Campbell, which means you're starting to get a little bit of his recruits, and I understand that. But first of all, I always think Iowa State, the Cyclones are always that team that surprises you on Thursday night. So I'm saying week 5 they beat Texas. And we'll talk about Texas as well, I think, coming up here. I think they're going to make a bowl game this year, and I think it's going to happen late in the season. They play I think they play Kansas State last week of the season. Now we'll see where Kansas State is because I have some comments about them. But if they can beat Kansas State week 13, I know it's at Kansas State, but if they can beat them week 13, I think they become bowl eligible, which is big for us.
I love that you brought up their close games because last year they were 7-5 against this spread. This is a team, if they're ever a home dog, take the home dog.
Right. Absolutely. I just think somehow they just always seem to beat somebody they shouldn't almost every year. I mean, we've seen it before, and always a Thursday night game, and that's why I'm picking that Texas game. But I think they sneak into a bowl game, and I think they're better than second to last this year.
Yeah, so I mean that's interesting though. So running through their schedule, Northern Iowa win, Iowa toss up, it's at home. Akron win, you're giving them the win at Texas. That's 3, maybe 4. At Oklahoma, no. Kansas, yes. Texas Tech, you're saying yes.
I'm thinking yes.
Debatable. Let's say yes. TCU, no. West Virginia, at West Virginia, no. I mean, you might be spot on. 6-6 if they do pull off the road upset.
Right, and I just like them. Like I said, if they can be a 4-quarter team instead of a 3-quarter team after you look at last season, I think they're gonna sneak in there.
Michael Lombardi, they're a 45-minute team. They need to be a 60-minute team.
You're darn right, and I think this is a team on the rise in the conference. So very excited to see that.
Well, it's interesting. You bring up Matt Campbell's second year, and that's sort of the interesting thing about college coaches is we've seen some guys like Tom Herman who immediately explode to success and parlay that into new jobs. And Matt Campbell could be like that. He could be a lifer, like a couple coaches in this conference, or really just one at this point.
Yeah.
A few. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. He's really starting to get his guys in. That's something that you'll hear about a lot. Year 2, he starts getting it in. Year 3 is really when you start seeing his guys as the core. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, it'll be an interesting season for the Cyclones.
Yeah.
Well, let's move up. I have Texas Tech 8, and it sounds like you had them 9. So we flip-flop there. Okay. Give me your lowdown on them.
So I mean, first of all, I think they're losing Patrick Mahomes, which it's weird. He's a first-round pick in the NFL draft this year. Goes to the first round. Goes to the Chiefs first-round pick to the Chiefs this year. I watched him last year. I was very high on him. I think he's a great quarterback. He's already at number 2 on the depth chart over there. I think the drop-off between him and the incoming starter, Nick
Shimonek.
I'm concerned. Now, I know Cliff Kingsbury, he's a hip guy. I've always liked him. But Texas Tech, other than Michael Crabtree's time there, they've struggled a lot at Texas Tech playing defense. I don't think the offense is going to do enough. And they're playing Oklahoma State, and West Virginia early. They could enter the month of November at 5-3 easily, and they basically have to beat Baylor and TCU in back-to-back weeks to avoid not being bowl eligible. If you're Kingsbury, I think you've got to go 8-5.
I don't necessarily see that happening. I mean, I think their offense is going to be fine. I think Shimonek at least he did well in his one go at it last year. He has a 6-1 touchdown to interception, literally 6 thrown, 1 pick. But I think their defense is god awful, which is why a couple of the teams that we'll get to at 7 and 6, I think could potentially flip flop with them if their defense proves to be better than it is. But on paper, they're only returning 6 starters. It wasn't a great defense last year to begin with. So we'll see how they go. I think that's really their big anchor that pulls them down.
Right. I mean, I think the shame of it is if you combined Texas Tech and Kansas, you'd have a superstar team. I mean, you'd have
you could.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. And Texas Tech has never been prominently good on defense, so that always hurts them. And Kansas never seems to have an offense or anything. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we can flip flop those two, Texas Tech and Iowa State. Who would you drive in at 7 then?
So my 7 might shock you. Mine's going to be Baylor.
I'm not overly shocked.
Okay. Yeah, my 6 might shock you then. But yeah, some people have West Virginia. I'm a big fan of the Phil Steele book. If anybody's viewing, you can see that I'm holding up the 2017 edition of the Phil Steele book, the book the experts can't go without. But it's a big preview book. He has West Virginia at 7. I have Baylor there. I think West Virginia is going to be better than they could be this year. Baylor, though, first year with Matt Rule. He just left Temple. So who knows what he really brings into to the system. It's just, I think the ripple effect of everything that's happened with their program, I think still affects them. You saw them have some good wins last year. They went 7 and 6. They won their bowl game against Boise State. So interesting to see how they go, but I think they're going to have a little bit of a hangover from everything.
I mean, I definitely agree. They lost a lot of talent last year. KD Cannon, a bunch of quarterbacks. So I would definitely agree there. And I'm with you. The weird part is I think under Matt Rule, they'll end up being a better defense. I think their defense is might be the best in the conference, but I think they're going to have a great defensive team. Can a Matt Rule coach team, who I loved him at Temple, can they do what they should be doing at Baylor? Can they play great defense in the Big 12 and survive?
So it's interesting that you asked that. They return 3 of their top 5 tacklers. Their top 1 out. Their number 3 out. Their secondary, they return 2 of the 4. Yeah, 2 of the 4. Or actually, no, I guess 4 of the 5 because they play a nickel. Or 3 of the 5, excuse me. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. I mean, really, you have to see how everything goes. I mean, they play a pretty easy start to their schedule. They play Liberty, FCS school. Actually, usually a high-powered offense. So that not actually that good, and the defense under Rule hasn't been installed yet. That could be a really nice indicator of how big of a shootout the Big 12 could be this year. Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners, which if you've never seen their logo, go look it up. It's pretty cool. That's a home game, probably a win. They go to Duke, which that's a toss-up. I mean, Duke.
Yeah.
Cliff's been good, and we could see how that goes. But then they run right into the gauntlet. They're going to face Oklahoma at home. Could be a bloodbath pretty quickly. They lost 45-24 at Oklahoma last year. So we'll see. But I think, yeah, it'll be an interesting season under them. I think it takes a year for Matt Rule's system to really install, and they finish at the most 7th.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say I like their running back, Terrence Williams. Got great explosiveness. If he can have some success this year and kind of do that Matt Rule ball possession tempo football, he might be an option. I think he's consistent, but he's also highly explosive, and I think that is critical for them. They're going to need to run the ball, which is kind of strange there. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited for a lot of reasons for Matt Rule. I really want him to do well. And it's a shame because of this scandal that we might see a step back from Baylor football, only because they'd been a laughing stock really until Robert Griffin III was there. So it'll be nice to see if they can sustain some success. I'm right to say that, right?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They haven't missed a bowl game, I think, since 2010. Trying to think what the first big year of RG3 was. I think it was 2011. So yeah, I mean, they haven't missed a bowl game in 7 years. So it'll be interesting to see how it is. I think that streak runs out though. Couple big games for them. I think the Texas game will be pretty vital. I think they win that. That's a home game for them right after hosting West Virginia, which that could be a win. I'm a little more optimistic on West Virginia, so I don't think it is. But yeah, I think that Texas game might be their big one. They also play Texas Tech in Arlington, which is basically Big 12 Central this year. That'll be one to watch as well, especially with what we were talking about with the lack of defense by the Red Raiders. Those I think would be their top 2 games to look out for. But if Baylor gets it rolling and they somehow barely lose to Oklahoma, I think that's a lock at this point. But they beat Kansas State. They pull off something like that. I mean, who knows where they could go?
Yeah, they end the year at TCU. That depending on how they do, that could be a decision maker for a bowl game almost. I'm all over the map with them, with, like you said, because of some of the issues they've had. What kind of talent are they going to put in the field? I would agree with you that they're probably in the bottom third of the conference this year. We've talked Texas Tech and Kansas, Iowa State. I think they're pretty much home tier 3 of the conference.
Sure.
Who would you put next then?
Who would I put at number 6? So did you have Baylor at number 7 as well?
I did, but by a hair, because I think number 6 is going to be West Virginia. Now you may disagree, and I think you will.
I do disagree.
Okay, who is your 6th team?
My number 6 is Texas.
Texas.
I do not believe in. I think I'm a big believer in it takes a couple of years to install. We saw it with Harbaugh. We've seen it with a lot of guys. And I don't feel a big season for them this year, or at least this year. Texas, for me, it'll be interesting. I mean, they still have Shane Buchel. They still got a lot of those guys from last year, but under a new system, a 5-7 season last year. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, my big worry for them, SC week 3 in LA, and I think that can derail an entire season if they really get roughed up.
Right.
I mean, Buchel's only a sophomore, and if he gets eaten up by that USC squad, that could be rough.
Yeah. Not only that, in October they're playing Kansas State, Oklahoma State in a row.
Yeah.
You've got
at least 2 of them are home games, and one's neutral site. So
I'm
not the worst.
But I think the problem is you go week 3 and you go Texas at USC, and then you go right into that stretch. Oof. So the thing is, if they get on a negative roll, that could be a problem. They've got a lot of great talent. I agree with you. I'm actually decently okay with where you ranked them. I definitely think they're going to be below. I have
the rest of the crop.
That. Yeah, I think them and TCU are going to battle for the next spot. So
So you have them. We have Texas and West Virginia flip flopped. Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I have West Virginia 5.
Yeah, but his only year. I mean, he kind of gets a mulligan punt year. It's his first year. After this, the pressure is going to be intense.
Who, Herman?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because it's Texas.
Oh yeah.
Will they ever recover? I think the one thing people forget is that when we were young, Alabama was not the super team it is now. So programs, and even Michigan until recently was having some tough years. So great programs have downturns. I think Texas's has been pretty pronounced, especially due that they started the Longhorn Network and they've been going downhill. So, so I think now would your next team after Texas be West Virginia?
So I'm going to put them there. I don't like putting them there. I think they have a higher ceiling than number 5. But I think just given where the other 3 teams or other 4 teams are in the conference, I think that's the comfortable spot for them. I think they do have a higher ceiling, though. The Mountaineers have an interesting schedule that's laid out in front of them, including a week 1 great matchup with Virginia Tech, and that's going to be, I believe it's down at, it's at FedEx Field. I believe it's technically a home, or I guess it's neutral site. But they have a nice little run at it. They'll have, if they can pull that win out, which is certainly possible, they have a nice little run at going 4-0 to start them through the first month of the season.
Okay.
Do a nice little road matchup with TCU, and I think that'll be the big barometer game for them. The big thing for West Virginia that I think a lot of people hold back on them is that they're only returning 5 starters on offense and 3 on defense, which kind of as a quick backup to Texas. That's the one place where I think they could thrive under the first year of Herman. They're returning 10 starters on defense. To West Virginia's 3. That's certainly, it's a big advantage, but I think having Dana Holgorsen in his 7th year at the school versus the first for Tom Herman is the ball's in Holgersen's court, I think.
No, right. I mean, it like last year, West Virginia surprised some people, which probably helped Holgersen's job.
Last couple years, they've had a great last couple seasons.
Yeah, I like their running back Justin Crawford. I will say this: Will Greer comes in. He never threw in his 6 games in 2015, 2 years ago for the Gators. He never threw for less. Never threw for more than 283 yards. But he's coming into a wide open offense known for creating quarterbacks. I think it's really all on him. If he has a great season, I'm with you. I think you could see West Virginia kind of sneak up a little bit and battle for, I would say, 3rd or 4th in the conference. I like them, though. I think they're better. I mean, once again, they lost 2 starters to the Eagles in the draft, which is pretty impressive. So we'll see what happens.
Sidney Jones.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited for what they can do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. I mean, they're returning 2 of their receivers, and that should be advantageous for them, especially with a guy like Greer. And he can, I mean, you saw him make things happen with that Florida team 2 seasons ago. And last year he did pretty well too. But yeah, I mean, they returned their leading rusher, Justin Crawford, who rushed for over 1,200 yards. That'll be big. Might give it is that they return only 2 starters on their offensive line. They have a sophomore playing center. So who knows? But I mean, an experienced quarterback could in terms of of how they go. But like I said, I think they have the potential of a much higher ceiling than 5th, but 5th I think is the right spot for them.
No, I understand that. So you got them 5th. Who do you think rounds out what I would consider the maybe I'm wrong saying this, the 4 contenders for the championship?
Okay, so number 4, I'm going to go with Kansas State.
Okay.
I think they could be number 3. They could be number 2. They're not number 1, but I think number 4 is the right spot for them. We'll get to why I have numbers 3 and 2 where they are. I mean, Bill Snyder coaching forever. There's nothing wrong there. Returning a lot of starters on offense. The defense, little suspect, I think. Could be great. They're returning some of their bigger secondary guys, almost their entire secondary to their 5 because they play nickel. But that linebacking core is not really that experienced. But it is an old defense. They have a lot of seniors starting, a lot of juniors. Same thing on offense, actually. But I think that it will be how it goes. They return their big guy at quarterback, Jesse Ertz, not related to Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
Year. But he's their leading rusher as well, their leading passer, which he could be a difference maker. He could push them to 3. I don't think to 2, especially given their schedule, because they have to go to – they host Oklahoma, which is actually great for them. But then they have to go to Oklahoma State, to Texas, which, as we talked about, could be an interesting game. They got to go to Texas Tech, to Kansas. They host TCU, which will be interesting.
I think that's
Not
going to
so,
be a big game.
that's gonna be a great game. So I'd actually make that as sort of their check it off as their most important game.
Yeah.
Because Oklahoma, I feel we'll get to them, but that's tough to really hold on to. The only thing going for them is it's homecoming. But the big thing they have for them is a good away schedule. They go to Vanderbilt, which unfortunately for our friends Kenzie Lucas and Ben Schmieren, not the best. DC. Then at Texas, at Kansas, at Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma State, which is a toss-up late in the season. It could be a great game, but I mean those first 4 games could be. You never know with an away game.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a big believer in Kansas State. By the way, Bill Snyder's gonna be 78 this year. That's amazing. That's incredible to think about. They're always like underrated. I think Bill Snyder almost deserves better. He reminds me of, say, a Phillip Rivers in the NFL, to give you kind of like a match there.
Oh, okay.
Always does really, really well. I mean, Rivers, the Chargers have struggled recently, but never won a Super Bowl, never won the big game. Think of a Dan Marino, a guy that consistently produces every year. Now, maybe Marino's a little too far because even though he never won the big game, he might be top 5 all time. But think of a quarterback or a coach. Think of Andy Reid. That's a great Andy. Every year, Andy Reid did really, really well, but he never won the Super Bowl. Bill Snyder comes. He brings a great team. They have a dynamic offense this year. I'm with you. Their defense is hurting a little bit compared to last year, although it's the Big 12, so who plays defense? But I'm with you.
No defense, you.
Yeah, it's a shame because I think they're close, but they've just never been able to grasp the whole thing. I switched them in TCU this year, and we'll talk about why. But
okay,
they're my 3rd team in the conference, and if it wasn't, I mean, it's just a tough year. I think if this was next year, if you took this team and put them next year's schedule, they're going to fight to win the conference. I really like Kansas State. I think they're one of the most underrated programs in the nation, period. And I want to see them have a moment of glory. They had a chance a couple years ago. It never worked out.
Yeah, no. That's a great pick there. And at least saying that they're one of the most underrated because they certainly are. And I mean, just looking at it, a couple of years ago, they were number 7 in the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon.
Yeah,
a Chip Kelly led Oregon. They lost, and that was probably their best shot. But then in 2014, they were ranked number 11, and they lost to UCLA. It's unfortunate. Last year was their first bowl win. Actually, they beat Michigan in 2013. Ooh. But haven't had a ton of great seasons. They've had a bunch of great seasons, but they haven't had a ton of signature seasons. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Snyder's had so long, 26 years as a state coach, 9th in his current stint. But I mean, he's done some great things with that program. Really keeps them in it. But I just think, and we'll get to why I think the other 3 teams will finish ahead. But I think the one thing that gives them a great shot at finishing it, the most 3rd, where you have them, is that away schedule.
No, yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I think it's rough. That's dangerous.
Yeah. But yeah, at number 3, I had TCU. So I mean, I think we've flip-flopped a lot of schools here. TCU, I think they have a great shot at. They could finish 2nd, really. They returned 10 starters on offense. Gary Patterson in his 17th season as the head coach of the Horned Frogs.
I love him. I love him.
Yeah, he's a great coach. I mean, he returns Kenny Hill once again at quarterback, threw for 3,200 yards last year. They return Kyle Hicks at running back. They have Taj Williams at wide receiver. We could run through all these different guys. Their defense returns 7 starters. So that's pretty great as well. And I mean, like I said, I think they could make a run at 2nd. The only issue is they were 6-7 last year.
Yeah.
They have a decent schedule ahead of them. They play Jackson State to start the season, at Arkansas. It could be actually a pretty good game. Home against SMU, which should be a win, but also could be a good game. But here's where it gets tricky. Their away schedule is a little tough. They're at Oklahoma State. We just talked about their their away game against Kansas State. At Iowa State, which should be a win. Then they run into 2 games that'll be tough. And then their last home game is at Texas Tech. And it doesn't sound bad considering what we were talking about before, but that's sort of that gut check game. Home game turns out to be as great as it could be. Both are maybe looking at the top 10. Oklahoma probably will still be in the top 10. I mean, that could be a game that if they lose on like a heartbreaker, it's a close loss. Texas Tech game for them, away, awful loss. It won't necessarily be a bowl season or bust game because they should at that point be 8-2. But maybe 9-1. Who knows? But it's definitely one that you still got to watch out for, and it's that game. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. Of course, this is trying to look into the crystal ball a little too far, but it'll be interesting to see how it all lays out for them. I do really like that offense, though.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny Hill, to me, if he limits the turnovers, they've got a chance. To me, they have a higher ceiling than Kansas State, who I think is guaranteed. I think they're a 3-4 definitely. TCU, I love Gary Patterson. I hope that defense turns around, and I think Kenny Hill is the kind of guy that can put them possibly over one of the next 2 teams we're going to talk about. Now, we're going to move on to number 2, and I'm gonna have you go ahead and give me who you think is going to be the number 2 team in the conference this year.
The fact that you're saying that to me makes me know that you're going to throw out the controversial pick. I'm going to go chalk. I'm going to have Oklahoma State at number 2 and Oklahoma number 1. Okay. It sounds like you're flip-flopping me.
I am flip-flopping. Now, I will get to
I'm going
to tell you.
Oklahoma State. We'll start with them, but
okay. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I think Oklahoma State's got it. Okay.
All right.
First of all, there's a lucky number this year. That's 50. Mike Gundy is turning 50 this year. Okay.
Oh.
That's pretty surprising, by the way, because he kind of seems like a young guy. Okay. Now,
been around forever.
Love Mike Gundy. Also love Mason Rudolph. More so, love James Washington, and they've got a little running game in Justice Hill. Okay. So they host Oklahoma this year, which I think is very important. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge for me. But this is actually why I'm picking them over Oklahoma. I think one of the craziest underreported stories of the year is the fact that Bob Stoops stepped down. Now, I don't know anything about Lincoln Riley. I know a little bit about him. I've read about him, but I don't know what he's doing. I know they've got a great quarterback led by Baker Mayfield, who I love. Sorry, great offense led by Baker Mayfield, great offensive line. I don't like the rest of Oklahoma, and I think this is the year where a guy like Gundy has the opportunity to one-up a young Lincoln Riley in that big game, push them over the top. Plus, Lincoln Riley has to go ahead in week 2 and play week 2 and play Ohio State number 2. That's huge.
Sure.
I don't care where the game is. And it's actually in Ohio State. I think that's an early loss for Oklahoma. I think that shakes the team a little bit, and I think they're going to have the same kind of season as last year. While I think the Oklahoma State Cowboys are going to roll to a conference victory and the 4th spot in the playoff this year.
Wow.
I think it's finally the year where they get, because they've been close, kind of like Kansas State. It's finally the year they get over the hump.
Yeah, that's not a bad take. I think you're wrong. I think so I'll play to your take that first-year coach, because it kind of contradicts what I've been saying all along. I'm not a big first-year coach guy. Baker Mayfield's great. I thought highly of Oklahoma last year. I picked them to make the playoff once again. 2 years ago, I think I picked them to win it all, and that turned out to be terrible. And once the playoff started, the one thing that I think, and you kind of hit on this, is that they have a sophomore starting at running back That could be a type deal where you're behind all 5 returning offensive linemen, and he just runs his way to open it up for Mayfield with 3 of his 4 receivers. That's including a tight end,
but not including
returning.
D.D. Westbrook.
Including D.D. Westbrook.
Not including D.D. Westbrook. I'm just saying.
All right. I mean, but we'll see. We'll see how that team does. I like their defense a lot, and I like it more than Oklahoma State's. I think you're right. I think they lose to Ohio State early. I think the Big 12 kind of gets this interesting little rap in terms of how it'll all go. And this will be the interesting thing about how the Big 12 championship game affects the college football playoff. I mean, the interesting thing is that you don't have this Oklahoma State game as their final game of the season. Coming back to my thoughts on the Cowboys, they play Oklahoma the first week in November. They usually play them the last week in November. For scheduling their schedule in terms of a conference as a whole to make it that the teams they think are going to be good playing each other in the last couple of weeks. At least that's how it seemed over the last few seasons. TCU, Baylor a few years ago, Oklahoma State 2 years ago, and then once again last year. But that being said, they're playing each other that week. They're likely to play each other again in the championship game. You and I both have that. The thing with me with Oklahoma State, a decent schedule. They host TCU, they host Oklahoma, which certainly bodes well for them. I think at Texas is an interesting one. I think at West Virginia is a very interesting game. I think that's one that you really got to watch out for. At Iowa State's their final road game before you get into season stuff, which I think should be a win. But at West Virginia and maybe even at Texas Tech, but I think their offense is way too good for Texas Tech. I'm thinking high-flying offenses coming together. I think those are 2 games that could be interesting, and I think that's the thing about the Big 12 that makes them such a conference to watch, and why they, despite having missed the 2 of the first 3 college football playoffs, in the loop. I mean, they have elite talent. That's why they're a Power 5 conference. But why one that you don't just write off right away, except for one school, like you do with some divisions within conferences, like we have for so long with the Big 10 West, and last year with the SEC East, once Tennessee got exposed for who they were. I mean, I think that's something that makes this conference so great, and especially with lack of divisions, that you have these teams that can basically be thrown into a blender, pop out 10 different, or I guess technically whatever is ways, even though it wouldn't happen that way because we agree that Kansas is not good. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think that back-to-back stretch, if they have a close one with West Virginia, they return home, you could see that as either kind of a emotional comeback and win against the rookie coach in their arch rival. You could also see it as a loss, and then they come back and win in the game. I think I mean, they play Kansas State in the second to last week. They host them. And Kansas State, as we were just saying, they could have a little run to third, maybe second. Depends on how Oklahoma State really navigates, because they have their bye week at the beginning of October.
Yeah.
Think about a ton with college football. You don't really think about it with the NFL a ton. The only reason why you do is because of fantasy. But the bye week's important, especially in college. These guys, especially if you do have to make that trip to West Virginia, it's something that you hear more when you talk about college basketball, but with football, it's still just as important.
It's a longer trip to West Virginia.
It's a long trip, yeah, especially from.
Hate that.
What'd you say?
I hate the conferences should be together. Big
They
12,
should. They absolutely should.
right? Big 12 is down in Texas, in the Texas region. The ACC is on the East Coast. SEC is Florida and South. Pac-12 is up the border. Big 10 over here. The Big East, unfortunately, is gone, but the Big East should be in the Northeast. I hate it. Oh, it bugs me. It bugs me.
It is annoying that have how everything's laid out. I mean, that's a pod, and I think a couple 30 for 30s in and of itself of why this has happened the way it has. But yeah, I mean, that trip to go from Austin, Texas on October 21st to Morgantown, West Virginia a week later, with a stop in Stillwater for, so many days to go back to class and practice a little bit. I mean, that's a lot of bing, bang, boom that could affect some of these guys. You have team, so you have some experience there, but who knows? I mean, my big thing coming back to Oklahoma and why I think they have a great shot. Baker Mayfield's great. You have all 5 starting offensive linemen in front of him, so that entire relationship is there. Yeah. And even with a sophomore running back, I mean, the guy, Rodney Anderson, 6'2", 223. He was a medical redshirt a couple years ago, and he missed last year with a neck injury.
Oh, that's pretty serious.
Yeah, so he's a redshirt sophomore. That's something that's you might want to watch out for. The guy behind him, Abdul Adams, was their third, rusher behind Joe Mixon, and then
Samji
how do you
Perine.
pronounce it? Yes, Perine. Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce his first name.
Two fantastic running backs that they're losing. I'm with you. I'm a big running backs a dime a dozen guy. Leonard Fournette is being replaced by a guy this year in the SEC who might be just as good, which which will be talked about later. So I don't want to get into that, but I don't think that's a massive letdown there.
I think though that when out of your top 8 tacklers, some of whom are in your secondary, 6 of them are returning. I think that's a big advantage that you can get, because tacklers are something, especially in a conference that's not known for its defense, especially if they're secondary guys that can tackle. I think that's something that's a big asset, and I think that carries Oklahoma well. I think that transition this into playoff talk. You have Oklahoma State as a playoff team. It kind of hopscotches a few of our other previews, but the Big 12 has been left out twice. Not to ruin other previews, so I won't ask you who do you have out, but sort of what are the other paths for the Oklahomas, the TCUs, potentially Kansas States of the world to make this playoff? Do they have to go 12-1? I mean, is that the worst record they could possibly have? Do they have to go 13-0?
No, I don't think they need to be undefeated. If I dot myself around the league, I think there's enough games early that if a team loses one game, I think that's it. You lose one this year, and it's against a decent opponent, like if Oklahoma State loses to an Oklahoma, and Oklahoma doesn't have one loss, and you win your conference in the Big 12, one loss, win your conference, lose against a good team, you're in. I think it's got to be one, because I think if you look around the rest of the league, there's enough talent elsewhere that there's going to be some issues.
Sure. Yeah, and that's sort of the thing. We kind of touched on the conspiracy theories of Oklahoma State needs to beat an Oklahoma team that's probably 10-2 and then beat them again, which probably makes it as an interesting play in the Big 12 championship. I mean, to think about it that way, of the fact that you're playing a round robin, each of your other 9 opponents once, and then one more time, their 2 losses almost need to be only to you. Because if, say, Oklahoma loses to, say, in your theory of Oklahoma State, they lose to Ohio State by so few points to really make it not a quote-unquote bad loss, and to keep their win as Oklahoma State beating Oklahoma twice as good wins. I mean, that's where the college football playoff gets interesting, and it gets not necessarily convoluted, but it kind of becomes this whirlwind of conspiracy and figuring out how you're going to sort of maneuver your way, that you're not doing a full scorched earth policy. You're not going to see that unless you really just dominate everybody like in Alabama or even in Ohio State. Hopefully the latter doesn't happen, but let's not get biased here. If with something like the Big 12s, the Pac-12s, which we'll get to it probably later this week, those conferences that are almost on watch, you need to walk on eggshells basically, and not break the ice. Let the zombies behind you break the ice.
Oh, nice reference. And that's why every week matters in college football.
Yeah,
I'm fired up for this season.
I am too.
We've only talked one conference. I know you're coming back with another preview. Me and the two of us will be back for a couple more. And then I think as we get closer to next Thursday's kickoff, we'll have a discussion about who we think are our favorites. And I'm pretty fired up for this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, clearly he's going to win it all. But other than that, not that I'm biased, but other than that, I think we're good to know.
Let's chug some gallons of milk. As we wrap things up, let's just give our quick. We can just fire them out. We don't have to count them down, but games, we kind of went through them, so we touched on them basically. We don't need to go into deep analysis, but a couple games that you think are going to be the big keys to the season. They can be between the marquee teams that we just went through.
No.
They can be those September games that may not seem like they're going to matter, but ultimately do.
I mean, I want to throw one out right away. Week 1. And it's not going to be the one you're thinking I'm going to. Week 1, Maryland, Texas.
Yeah, I like that game a lot.
Maryland struggled a lot, and I agree, but we've never seen Tom Herman at Texas. We don't know what they're going to come out. What's their mindset going to be? Now, I think Texas is going to win, but do they blow Maryland out? Is it close? I think that's a caveat for the rest of the season.
Well, and that's the thing, and we'll get to Maryland whenever we get to the Big Ten, but Maryland's had a good start to their last couple seasons. So, I mean, we really are going to get an idea of what we're getting out of Texas this year. Last year we had that nutty game with Notre Dame where we had the Texas is back folks. I don't think we're going to get something like that. And I think this is something that interesting. It's on Saturday. It's not the Sunday, Monday, because they can do that in week 1 of the college football season with no NFL. Yeah, I mean, that's a great pick.
Yeah. We talked about West Virginia, Texas Tech week 1 as well. I mean, I'm sorry, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, week 1.
Yeah. I mean, I think then week 2, you look at Oklahoma, Ohio State. I mean, a few other games I think might matter that week. TCU, Arkansas. I think that's a good game.
Sneaky good game.
Arkansas could be sneakily good.
Yeah. And they're the kind of team Kenny Hill could make a couple mistakes with and drop TCU out of the running for a playoff spot this year.
Well, I mean, that's what happened last year. Arkansas pulled off the upset.
Yep.
And kind of derailed that whole season. And that was at home. This time they have to go to Arkansas. It's not a Jerry World game. I'm surprised that it's not.
But
we'll get to, I forget who Arkansas plays at Jerry World. I think they might have 2. But that's one that you definitely got to look out for. I think within conference, a couple of them are big standouts. Oklahoma State, and kind of anything within that round robin of the top 4, I think are definitely ones.
Yeah, that's week 10. Week 7 is Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah, the Red River Rivalry is always fun to watch. That's another Jerry World game.
Week 3 is Texas at USC, which I actually think is almost bigger for USC because USC, and we're going to get to the Pac-12, but they're ranked very high. And can they dominate a Texas team? But then again, Texas could be great. They've got a lot of returning starters, so we'll kind of see. I think the week 1 is Texas a legitimate top 25 team. I think week 3 is Texas a legitimate contender early on in time. So I think that's a big game. I mean, I mentioned Baylor at TCU to end the season, which I think is important. And then anytime Kansas State or TCU is playing one of the top 2, one of the 2 Oklahomas, that's got to be a big game, right?
Yeah. Because I think if either gets kind of dethroned right away, like say TCU loses to Arkansas and Arkansas doesn't end up being really anything in the SEC West,
They're out of it.
I think TCU then unfortunately kind of gets their shot at the throne thrown away. They could be, to keep it in medieval things, in medieval terms, a jester within the court.
Yeah.
As like a New Year's Day bowl type team.
Or a Brad, kicked out early,
Yeah. I mean, that full Game of Thrones there. But I mean, they play Oklahoma November 11th. I think that could be one of the biggest games of the season, especially if we're having Oklahoma and Oklahoma State there. I mean, that's a big show me game. I mean, that's Oklahoma's real last threat.
Yeah.
Unless West Virginia really exceeds into that ceiling that we were talking about before, that's Oklahoma's last game. I mean, that's their last jump. But yeah, I mean, I'm so excited that football's back. I can't wait for it to start. And it's going to be a fun season. I can already tell. Last year was nuts how it all ended with Penn State coming out of nowhere to win the Big Ten, and then how the Rose Bowl went. I mean, we're talking about two different other conferences, but I mean, the Big 12 had their crazy end. I mean, if last year was any barometer and kind of the chaos continues, we're in for a fun season, especially those that don't have a horse in the race. I can't wait, man.
I'm excited. I'm fired up. I'm excited for the next pod. Looking forward to hearing your ACC preview later this week. Am I right?
I think so. Greg and I were talking about it a little bit. He isn't the biggest college football analyst, as he said to me. He loves watching it, but who knows? Hopefully we inspired him. I think we might try to do, and I don't know what night we're going to do it, but we might try to do a baseball, college football back-to-back, maybe megapod.
Okay.
But we'll see. I think you and I are going to try to come back on Wednesday night with the Pac-12, then watch out for when the baseball show comes this week. Depending on what Greg's availability is, could be tomorrow, could be Thursday, but then we won't have a post-game show for Slip and Flip, but then Slip and Flip.
Prepare yourselves. I'm fired up either way, though.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun week ahead of us, fun week and a half before the college football season starts. But that's going to do it for our Monday night. Thank you so much for listening. As always, go find us on Twitter, ThunderBLG. Find us on Facebook and Instagram, Thunderblog Sports. Let us know what you thought of this. This was our first foray into football. We did some NFL draft stuff back in April, but I think that's going to do it for us, Matt. Thanks for jumping into this wild frontier with me, if you will, keeping in that rootin' tootin' Big 12 theme.
No problem, baby. Bang, bang, bang. Little Red Raiders, little Cowboys for you coming in
bang,
hot.
Bang.
I'm fired up.
That's going to do it for us tonight for the Funvee Tailgate presented by ThunderblogSports.com and Matty D. I am the G-Man, Jordy Cannell, saying good night, everybody.